Would you please rise to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do have a couple of changes on today's agenda. Item 4 will be moved to the regular calendar. It will move off of the consent agenda. And item 8 will be moved to a later agenda next week, I believe. Is that?
We have to make a motion.
Okay.
I'll just pull item 8 on the consent agenda if you're ready for
All right.
that to happen. And I would move that it be given a 1-week continuance.
Okay. We'll do that after the motion on the consent calendar. There's one other item that is being removed from today's regular agenda, and that is item 14, which it's a public hearing, but we did not adequately notice the public for it, so we will move it off of this calendar pending appropriate public notice, and it will be rescheduled. Okay, at this point, do I hear any other items from any member of the public, staff, or board to come off the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move the balance of the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 4-0-1. Supervisor Callaway will not be with us today.
Okay, that's number 4 and number 8, correct?
Yes. We won't consider number 4 at this point. It will be placed on the regular calendar, so we now move.
I move for a 1-week continuance on item 8, Mr. Chair.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 4-0-1 and will be moved to next week's agenda. Yes, item number 4, Shirley Ryan.
Good morning. Shirley Ryan, County Administrative Office. The reason this was pulled, there was an amendment to the resolution that was given to the board, and I gave the new copy of the resolution to the clerk for distribution. And it addresses mainly that this is an interest-bearing designated fund. Just a little history on the Land Use Trust Fund. In 1990, a resolution was passed by the board combining all the land use departments into one land use trust fund with a basis of funding that was the difference between budgeted revenues versus actual revenues. It had took into consideration whatsoever what the revenues were versus the expenditures. In 2004, the basis of funding was amended via resolution to reflect the same difference between budgeted revenues versus actual revenues, with the caveat that expenditures could not exceed revenues. 2 years ago, when we closed fiscal year and the question arose regarding the basis of funding by the Community Development Agency Director, and in further review, in consult with County Council, reviewing the government code, in concert with grand jury questions regarding this, we took a further look at it. And with the permission and concurrence of the CDA director, we plan to bring it back once the new building and planning fees were adopted. And under the government code, it states that the building fees and expenditures should be segregated, and the tie-in to the designated fund should be between actual revenues received versus actual expenditures. And that's what this resolution does. It amends the basis of funding, so it is based in the reality of actual revenues versus actual expenditures, so that when revenues exceed the expenditures, the difference between the revenues and expenditures will move into the designated fund to help in the years of a slower growth in the economy and downturn in construction, such as what we're facing now. So therefore, then when revenues are lower than expenditures, funds can be transferred out of the designated fund to make the building department whole. And this is really technically the way it should work. And this is an interest-bearing account, and on the years when there is a shortfall in the building department and there's not enough money in the designated fund to make up that, then we'll look forward to the future years to help offset that accordingly. But this is, and we've also discussed this with other land use departments. The surveyor, which was once a part of the land use designated fund, has now moved into public works, and so it's no longer impacted. Environmental health as well. It was, again, certain revenue line items budgeted versus actuals, and to tie in and make that be expenditures, identifying and segregating the expenditures that are tied to those fees were a little more difficult. So we had those discussions with each of the previous land use departments that were involved in this designated fund. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public or staff? Is there a motion on the recommendation to adopt a resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 4-0, 1 absent. We now move to public comments. This will be 5 minutes per person, 15 minutes per topic. I'm using the purple sand today. It's our high-tech timer. And any member of the public who wishes to comment on an item not on the agenda is welcome to do so now.
You don't need the timer.
Okay.
I'm Bob Mulvaney. I live in Murphy's, and I'm representing the Calaveras County Taxpayers Association. Yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of the infamous Kelo decision that allowed private property to be taken for someone else's private gain. And we respectfully asked this august body to consider action to assure that this type of eminent domain abuse never happens in Calaveras. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the voters of California have already passed some judgment on that as a whole. Other members of the public wish to speak on an item not on the agenda. Quiet morning. Yeah, I guess everybody's waiting for the budget to break here.
May I have a 2-minute recess before you review of correspondence?
Yes, Supervisor Tryon requests a 2-minute recess. We will grant that. Actually, we'll grant a 3-minute recess. He'll be back shortly, and we'll deal with correspondence, reports, and various matters of concern. Now, we'll have correspondence, which will, this is review of correspondence, reports, and various matters of concern from the Board of Supervisors. We'll start with Supervisor Tryon today, who has a scintillating report from RCRC.
Yeah, well, RCRC had their meeting. Each year we have one meeting in the county of the president of RCRC. So this year the president was from Del Norte, Dave Finnegan. So we met in Crescent City. And I had no idea what I was getting into because it was an 11-hour drive up and a 12-hour drive back, and held a meeting for a day. So Wednesday was an all-day drive day, and then Thursday was a meeting day, and then Friday was an all-day drive day.
So, Tom, how much does diesel cost in Crescent City?
It wasn't bad, quite frankly. I think it was about $5.10 or $5.15 because it took about a tank to get there, and then I filled up there and then came home. But the worst of it was we hit Sacramento right at 5 o'clock, so we took the detour to Davis, 113, and then because we're working on I-5 if you're going south. And it took like an hour and a half to get from Davis to the turnoff on 99 in Sacramento. It was just god-awful. And don't ever hit there at 5 o'clock, so all I got to say, particularly while this construction's ongoing. But it was an interesting meeting, and I'll just give the highlights of it. I'll just go through the agenda as it was presented to the Board of Directors. The first was a discussion on Assembly Bill 2754, which is BAS, which addresses counties' workers' compensation costs. There is hope that Schwarzenegger, if this passes, will veto it, because Schwarzenegger is basically on record as wanting to control workers' compensation costs, but nobody's certain what will happen. And this is basically, it would include, and I can't even begin to pronounce this, but staph infections to the list of presumptions for workers' compensation claims for public safety employees. So this would basically be all our public safety employees. RCRC and I believe CSAC are strongly opposed. It could add significant cost to the county budget. And it also says that these staph infections result when a culture test comes back negative, but it will be difficult for a public employer to deny such a claim based on the presumption, even if the culture test comes back negative. So if that goes forward, then we're going to see probably an increase in workers' compensation costs for the public safety employees. We talked at some length over fire protection and services and state responsibilities areas. Senator Kehoe basically is an author of a package of what is referred to as fire-related legislation. It's a good thing Marita isn't here, because one of the staff members said Senator Kehoe is probably the worst enemy of rural California in the state legislature. So she has a lot of things that hammer pretty hard on rural California that she's going forward with. But her SB 1500, when it comes to fire, defines a project as any of the following: a development agreement and a bunch of stuff, including just a ministerial permit that would result in the construction of a residential dwelling unit. So it goes down and basically includes everything. It requires the county to notify the Board of Forestry of the proposed project when the application is complete. It requires the Board of Forestry to determine if the project should remain in a state responsibility area or be a local responsibility for structural fire protection services. So where this is going is it's basically going to say that the State Board of Forestry is going to decide everything about fire protection in the county. I mean, everything in California, in Calaveras County, is a state responsibility area, with the exception of the City of Angels Camp. So all of this affects everybody except the City of Angels Camp, if this in fact becomes law. It requires the Board of Forestry to exclude land from an SRA if the residential density exceeds one residential dwelling unit per 20 acres, averaged across an area prescribed by the board. So the board can just draw up the boundaries any way the board wishes to draw them up, the board being the Board of Forestry, not the Board of Supervisors. So I'll try to be very clear. The Board of Forestry, and they can, and if there's a residential density of greater than 1 per 20 acres, the board can say this will not be in a state responsibility area, which means we're going to have to figure out, we're going to be back in county fire, I guess, or something, or else the independent fire districts are going to have to expand to where there's absolutely no gaps whatsoever. It also provides that if the Board of Forestry determines that the proposed project requires removal of the land from an SRA, that the county shall not act on the project until the county ensures that structural fire protection services are provided by doing one of the following. One, creating a community facilities district for fire protection for the affected area. Secondly, requiring the annexation of the affected land to a city or special district that provides fire protection. Or three, contracting with CAL FIRE to provide structural fire protection services. Again, it provides this legislation that a contract with CAL FIRE shall include a provision requiring the county to pay all state costs to provide the structural fire protection services under the contract, and there's no limits as to the amount, or anything. So if this goes forward, why that I think would have a very significant impact on rural California. So because basically all the SRAs are in rural California. the state responsibility areas. That's what SRA stands for. We talked a little bit about the highway bill. They're trying to get something in it for rural areas when it comes to safety. They basically stated in rural areas, for the first time, the Act provides $90 million annually to increase safety on high-risk rural roads. Each year, more than 25,000 people die on rural roads, which is a fatality rate 2.5 times greater than urban roads. So they're trying to, with the new safety law legislation, get something in that would, at least for rural areas, provide something, some additional safety funds, as being we have 2.5 times the fatalities on our roads than they do on the urban roads. And that's probably just because on the urban roads you're congested and you can't go fast enough to kill as many people. We talked a little bit about the California consensus principles on federal transportation reauthorization, and this is a group of people concerned with transportation that are trying to come up with some consensus to present to Congress so that these principles will be incorporated. I'll just briefly read the 7. It doesn't take, I won't get into discussion of the 7, but the first is to ensure the financial integrity of the highway and transit trust funds. Second is to rebuild and maintain transportation infrastructure in a good state of repair. Thirdly, establish good movement as a national economic priority. Fourth, enhance mobility through congestion relief within and between metropolitan areas. Fifth, strengthen the federal commitment to safety and security, particularly with respect to rural roads and access. Sixth, strengthen comprehensive environmental stewardship. And seventh, streamline project delivery. It was a little interesting that the strength and comprehensive environmental stewardship, they felt they had to put something in about the environment because Barbara Boxer is the chair of the Highway Committee in Congress, and they felt that they needed to throw something Barbara's way if she's going to look at this in a favorable light. We talked a little bit about the implementation of the California Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, which is AB 32, which I don't understand, but Schwarzenegger signed here a year ago or better. And they're talking about, they're right now trying to do a scoping plan, and the scoping plan will include specific regulatory and voluntary, I like that term, voluntary action within Air Resources Board must develop by January 1st, 2011 and implement by January 1st, 2012, and will also set the projection for the 2020 greenhouse gas emissions level if no changes made in current greenhouse gas emissions, which is referred to as the base level. One of the things that we're going to end up addressing is the Air Resources Board is in the informal stage of drafting a proposed control measure for reducing landfill methane gas emissions. So our solid waste is going to get caught up with that, and they're going to end up having to address what we're going to do about the methane gas generation that we have at the landfill, which all landfills do that basically bury, or even not bury, I guess. We talked quite a bit about the budget and kind of where it's going, and the sense of the lobbyists at RCRC is going nowhere. They think there's really very little in the way of conversations that are taking place currently. They gave us some dates that are going to be critical in the state budget process. The first date is July 1st, which is the constitutional deadline to have a budget. And of course, that brings a lot of laughter and chuckle because there isn't a ghost chance in hell that anything's going to be done by July 1st, in everybody's opinion. The next critical date is the 10th of August, because that's the date you have to have prepared the documents for borrowing. In other words, for a cash loan, a cash flow problem that the state is facing, if they're going to do any borrowing, then August 10th is the date that they have to have the documents prepared for borrowing. Then August 31st is another critical date, because that's the day of adjournment for the legislature. So, there's probably be a lot of political pressure if the legislature adjourns on August 31st without a budget. And then the time frame, September 5th to September 10th, someplace within that time frame, is the drop dead date to put anything on the ballot for November. So if there's going to be anything to address the budget, the drop dead date is probably somewhere between September 5th and September 10th to get something on the ballot. We talked a little bit, and I think it's going to be relevant in our preliminary budget, about the Runner, it's called Runner 2 initiative that will be on the state ballot in November. And it's called Runner 2 because it's the husband and wife are both in the assembly. And so they're sponsoring it. I don't know how a husband and wife can be both in the assembly representing two separate districts unless they're separated and living in two separate districts. But anyway, they're both elected to the state assembly, so it's known as the Runner 2 initiative because it's Mr. and Mrs. Runner, I guess, that are the ones sponsoring this. And this has a lot to do with law enforcement. And the runners are, as I understand it, are supportive of law enforcement. And so they put an initiative on the ballot to secure law enforcement funding and to make sure that law enforcement funding at the state level is not cut. And the reaction to that, particularly not the U.S., but the state Senate, is they're saying if you're going to go with the Runner initiative, then we are just going to automatically defund everything to do with law enforcement, which is, the sheriff, the local sheriff grants and the local sheriff everything. And then, we're looking at, and the sheriff's talking about how he has to make all these cuts, even though from the general fund perspective, his budget's going up. Not down, and he hasn't taken any cuts, but his budget's going to take a big hit from state cuts, and I think that's really where the discussion is going to revolve around. And so the state Senate is basically saying if the Runner 2 is going to go forward, then we're just going to defund everything to do with local law enforcement. So that's where that is, and nobody thinks they're even close to any compromise on the budget at this point. We talked a little bit about the Department of Conservation's proposed revisions to the Williamson Act. And we had, I don't know, when we had our audit, I think there were, 6 or 7 or 8 or something material breaches. I forget what the number was. They said that they're finishing up the audits on some of the other counties now, and some of the counties have 90 and more material breaches. So the state legislature is looking at that and saying, well, we want to change the Williamson Act so we don't have so many material breaches. And the Department of Conservation is sponsoring Assembly Bill 2921 by Assemblymember Laird, which would make a number of changes to the Williamson Act. And it would establish higher penalties for material breaches of Williamson Act contracts, among other things. And according to the author, the principal purpose of this legislation is to tighten up a series of loopholes that, in certain cases, could undermine the enforceable restrictions that form the legal and political foundations of the Williamson Act. So we probably can anticipate, given the results of the Department of Conservation audits, not only in this county, and we're probably small fry, but most of the Williamson Acts, quite frankly, are in rural counties. They're not in urban counties. That we're going to see some Williamson Act legislation that's going to not only increase penalties, but it's going to probably increase the paperwork, et cetera, in an effort to increase accountability. So that's also out there. They said basically that the state in the legislature, particularly the Assembly, the Republicans are basically saying, well, we're not going to support a budget if we don't get We don't want fees on state responsibility areas, and we don't want the Williamson Act subventions cut. And they also have some other demands, but the state responsibility area fees can be implemented by majority vote, not two-thirds. But the Republicans are basically saying, well, we'll hold up the whole budget process if you do that. So it's just not, it doesn't seem like there's much compromise in the wind at the present time. So anyway, so I picked up the Daily Triplicate. This is the Crescent City newspaper. And it says, GOP wants to cap state spending, and it's a very short article. It just says, Republican lawmakers said Wednesday they want a spending cap, an emergency reserve fund as part of a long-term solution. The proposal would only allow state spending to grow. This proposal would allow state spending to grow only as fast as the population plus inflation. The system is broke, and thus we take steps now to adopt long-term fixes, et cetera, et cetera. The proposal calls for temporary sales tax cuts when debts are paid off and the reserve fund is full. The Republicans touted the plan as a way to avoid boom and bust budget cycles. Assembly Speaker Karen Bass, who's obviously a Democrat from Los Angeles, said lawmakers instead should examine ways to raise revenues by closing tax loopholes or raising fees. So basically you have a let's control spending on the Republican side versus let's raise revenues on the Democratic side is what it's facing up to be. And Democrats are also are opposed to Republican budget proposals to roll back requirements related to environmental protection, workplace safety, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. They accuse Republicans of trying to hold the budget process hostage by demanding such things. Republicans try to exploit, let's see, Democrats need some Republican votes in the Assembly and Senate to reach the two-thirds majority. Republicans try to exploit that clout every year during budget talks. This is not going to happen on my watch, Bass said, of the regulatory changes demanded by Republicans. We are not surrendering to their demands. So, you know, we're going to be talking budget for a long time, I think. That concludes my comments.
Any dates, commitments, or meetings?
This week? No, I think I have a clear calendar this week.
Okay, Supervisor Claudino.
This week, not much other than there's a Chamber of Commerce mixer in Copperopolis on Thursday. Is that correct, Russ? At the is that at the Copper Mill?
Coppertown Square.
Coppertown Square. And on Saturday night, the annual Valley Springs Boosters fireworks display at Hogan. I'll be there. That's it.
And the supervisor from the 5th. Down here all by myself with a gap in between.
You lonely?
Yeah. Okay, this at times sounds like a Visitors Bureau spot here, but we are having some significant events in the county this week. The Arts Council, with their famous Music in the Park activities, will be going over to Valley Springs at the Vets Park on Wednesday at 5:30. No, I guess it's 6:30, but anyway, it's always a very enjoyable event. As Bill mentioned, the Chamber Mixer and the Coppertown Square. And unfortunately, we double booked a Copperopolis Community Plan meeting for that night as well. So while the Chamber is going to be having fun at Coppertown Square, we'll be wrestling with the Copperopolis Community Plan issues at the firehouse, and that starts at 6:30. I'll also be at the Boosters, and then on Sunday I'm going to a Habitat for Humanity groundbreaking in Rancho Calaveras. A couple of other things that kind of piqued my interest in Tom's report about the state, what's it, SRA, the responsibility areas. It reminded me that some month and a half ago or so we talked to some extent about the proposal, my proposal to ban fireworks in Calaveras County this year, and I guess we all know that we didn't do anything about that, and the holiday is coming up, and I just would really hope that people that have their fireworks purchased, that they be very careful, especially careful this year. I've gotten a lot of calls from people expressing their consternation that we're not taking a proactive role on that, and I want to just not necessarily warn you, but after the holiday is over and the concerns from the parent-teacher associations and the state, or some of the church groups that use these fireworks stands as a revenue generator, when that fervor has calmed down a little bit after the holiday, I'm going to bring this back again and see if we can't approach this from a standpoint of I don't know, but I guess that we can debate it on all sides of the board here, but I really think that we should give these people or the groups fair warning that there might be other ways to raise funds other than jeopardizing their neighbors' homes. So I would, on that note, I would encourage you to come to the Hogan fireworks instead, because those Hogan fireworks are on an island surrounded by water, so that's about as safe as you can get. And that, I think, that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Thomas. As for me, we'll be in budget hearings today and probably sometime tomorrow as well. I'm filling in for Marita Calloway at the Fish and Game Commission meeting on Wednesday evening. I'll be filling in also for her at the Juvenile Justice Commission meeting on Thursday. Glencoe Community Planning meeting also Thursday night. The final meeting of the maybe the final meeting of the Economic Summit Planning Committee on Friday morning, the 27th. Art in the Garden up in West Point on Saturday, the 28th. And that's all I have to report for meetings. I do want to let people know that the Sierra Conservancy has completed allocations to the counties of the South Central Sierra for this fiscal year, but there is a new round of project funding which is expected to begin in the next fiscal year with in the neighborhood of $1 million coming to the region, so that people who are interested in particularly watershed-related issues, that's their mission, should come talk to me at their earliest convenience. The deadline for applications will be in the first week of September, and the process is on their website. And that's all I have to report. CAO?
Nothing today, sir. Nothing.
Carol? Nothing. All right.
I go back to one item.
Yes, of course.
I will be late arriving tomorrow morning, so I probably won't get here until somewhere between 10 or 10:30.
If that's the case, we may want, we've already posted notice for it, though. How would you like to handle that?
You can always convene the hearing if you like to wait. You know, there's no penalty as far as public notice with respect to waiting. Starting early before these posted time would be an issue, but I think it probably would be prudent, given you have 4 sitting members available, to hold the session until Supervisor Tryon gets here.
That would be my preference. Do you think you can make it by 10?
I will try very hard. My wife has a medical issue. I have to take care of that first thing in the morning. So
all right. Well,
if it turns out something happens, I'll call you so you know.
All right. In deference to that, we will be commencing our meeting at or about 10 o'clock. However, we will, I think, come at 9 in order to be there to let people know. All right. The meeting is now adjourned.